This is the Youthful and Useful podcast by Leap Africa.
A stakeholder, if I just use a basic definition, is anyone that is affected by or affects your business. I think one of the frustrating things for me working as a communications professional is people thinking, oh, it's communications. Just to post on social media. It's just to... No, bros and sis.
Yeah.
There's research involved.
No deeper than that.
You want to look at what is the context, what are the cultural nuances, and then how do I make sure that my messaging lands well. Sometimes organization can be outward, facing. We talk about the stakeholders, your internal stakeholders, your people are so important. Are you representing yourself? So you can't say that we are an organization that we show empathy. You're showing empathy to your customers. You're showing empathy to the general public, but then you're lacking in empathy in your policies within your organization. That is a say-do problem. So you must guard that trust, and that's where communications professionals come in terms of they're the guardians of your reputation. They guard that trust. And what is trust built on? Trust is built on openness, transparency, and communication.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our Youthful and Useful podcast. If you're a returning viewer, you are the absolute best. And if this is your first time, a special welcome to you. Trust me, you'll find these conversations very useful. My name is Jaiyesimi, and I will be your host for today. Now, this season, we are focusing on empowering you with fundamental principles and expert insights of social entrepreneurship as a means to address critical gaps and challenges faced by entrepreneurs across the African continent. Now, before we dive in, get your notepads, get your pens, get a little drink, and maybe something to munch on, because you will have to take down notes. These conversations, we're about to release gems, that you will need for the future. So get ready, right? Let's get right into it. In this episode, we'll be discussing knowing your stakeholders. Whether you're an entrepreneur looking to expand your network or a business owner aiming for long-term success, you are in for a treat with our expert guest, and this conversation will be packed with insights you won't want to miss. Our guest today has over 10 years of experience working in the communications field. She's a co-founder of the Comms Avenue, a capacity building and networking platform for communications professionals. She's also a part-time lecturer at the Chartered Institute of Public Relations UK program at the University of Nairobi, Kenya. And she's the author of the book From Clueless to Success, a collection of 20 backstories from her journey as a communications professional. In her career, she has and still works with organizations and senior executives in diverse industries to strategically leverage the power of communications to achieve organizational objectives. She has an honors master's degree in corporate and marketing communications from IE Business School, and her work has been featured in top publications like Punch, Guardian, Leading Ladies Africa, Guardian Women, The Nation, She Leads Africa, among many others. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the communications advisor, Adedoyin Jaiyesimi, to the show. Hello, Adedoyin.
Thank you so much
for joining us today.
Heartwarming introduction.
Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm looking forward to these conversations.
Same here.
You have no idea. I know that this is going to be very insightful. I hope you guys are ready. Okay, so let's just get right into it, right? Can you share a bit about yourself and your journey in the communications industry? Why communications?
I always like this question because when people ask, it seems like, oh, I had this grand plan, maybe since when I was young. I really stumbled into it. I have a book called From Clueless to Success, which literally says how I found myself in the communications industry. I had gone through a period where I didn't know what I was gifted at. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And God really ordered my steps to start interning at a media company. And that's where it all started from. And I realized, wow, I could just use my ability and gift for writing to shape narratives, to tell people stories, to make a difference in the world. And that really was the foundation of my career. And it just started to go bigger and bigger from there, to be honest.
Amazing, amazing. I'm sure that there are people who are, a lot of people who are listening that can relate with that. You know, you start out sometimes not even really knowing what it is you
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
do. And then there are a lot of us that are doing things that are not even related to, university degrees and all of that.
I studied law for my undergrad, so I
Look at
can
that.
relate to that.
Exactly. So don't worry. If you feel that way right now, you will get it. Don't worry. Just carry on with us. Okay, so what inspired you to co-found the Coms Avenue? And
Okay.
what gap? So here it is. What gap did you see in the market that you wanted to fill? That inspired the Coms Avenue.
Okay, so the Comms Avenue honestly has been a work in progress. So in 2019, at the time, I'd been running an agency, and I really felt led by God to close the agency. And you're going to hear me talk about that a lot. I'm very led by God in everything that I do. And I had shut down the agency in September, and I was wondering what next? What am I supposed to be doing? And I'm always telling entrepreneurs, executives, personal branding, talk about what you do. But I was like, I'm not really doing anything. So what am I going to be talking about on LinkedIn? So I decided, you know what? Let me share my experiences, the behind the scenes, because a lot of times people are talking about the successes, the wins. I wanted to tell people, look, I made these mistakes. These are the lessons that I learned. And that was what I kept doing on LinkedIn. And it started getting traction. Joy, there was a day that the messages, I'm like, okay, I didn't really know that this thing would get this much interest. So then I saw it, and something that I'm really big on is on knowledge sharing. I can't know it all, right? So I said to the people that, okay, what if we do an event where we all come together? I share what I know, you share what you know, you get an answer, and we go. And then we plan to do that event March 2020, and we all know that COVID happened, lockdown, so we couldn't do that event. So the pivot was to a community. And so we started with about 50 people, basically Nigerians. And then now we're over 1,500 professionals from 25 African countries. And honestly, the gap really is that of information. People just want to know, oh, I'm not alone in my journey. Oh, I need help in this. Oh, I need mentorship. And because we had a community, we started responding to the needs. So we created a mentorship program. We create resources and guides to just meet that professional, because what we want to do is empower young African communications professionals to be at the forefront of shaping the narratives within the continent. Every business needs a communicator, and so we want to equip them to do that work. So it's been a work in progress, to be very honest.
Fantastic. I like what you just shared. There are times when, dear LinkedIn, you hear you read all of these stories, and you think that people are superhumans and
They're always
doing all of
delighted
these
to
things.
announce.
Right. And you're wondering what am I doing in my life? Because how come I'm not achieving all of these grand things? But the truth is, it's step by step.
Yes.
Right? It's a progress. You would get there, and there are things that happen behind the scenes that nobody sees.
Nobody.
And those things are the things that actually make us human.
Exactly.
Right? And when we can
exactly.
connect on that level, it's easier for us to then, segue into professional things and begin to provide that knowledge and close the knowledge gap that you had identified. Fantastic. So let's talk about stakeholders, right? How do people, entrepreneurs, identify their stakeholders? Who are my internal stakeholders? Who are external stakeholders? You just hear these things: stakeholders, internal stakeholders, external stakeholders. How do I know who is who? And how do they categorize them? The hierarchy, priority. Who should you be communicating this to? Who should you be telling that amongst your stakeholders? Do you just send the email to all of them that these are my stakeholders? This is the information I have. Take it. How do you differentiate?
Okay. I think at the very, very foundation of it is you're starting a business. Who are the people that you are trying to reach with this business? Typically, that's your customers / your clients. Internally, you have your employees, you have suppliers or people in your value chain. A stakeholder if I just use a basic definition, is anyone that is affected by or affects your business. And that pool is going to be different for different people. If I have a food business, trust that NAFDAC is going to affect my business.
Yeah.
So NAFDAC is my stakeholder. The person that is supplying the packs for my food is my stakeholder. Why? Because the day that maybe that pack is substandard, it affects my own
Yes.
operations. So you need to think about it in that light. People just think, sometimes I work with entrepreneurs and like, we're trying to reach the general public, everybody. I say it's a lie. Even if you are selling bread, there are people that you cannot be speaking to everybody. So
Yes.
who are we trying to reach? Who is affected by my business, my product, my services, and who will this affect? And then you create a list. Now, in terms of prioritization, I don't want this to become too academic, but we have what we call an influence power matrix that we usually use. So who has influence? So government, for example, government has influence and they may have high interest in your business. So remember in the transportation industry, for example, there was a policy about banning Okadas at the time
Yes.
that changed some ride hailing business. So you need to think about this person has high interest, this person has high influence. So you put them as high priority. However, if somebody has low interest and maybe you think, oh, they have low influence, anything can make that person, right, become a high influence. And I'll give you an example because for everybody you identify as a stakeholder, please do not ignore anybody. Because that person that you feel, okay, this person, let's use Twitter or X, maybe puts a tweet and you're like, this person has 4 followers. Who is she? Who's Joy? In the grand scheme of things. And then one warrior of an influencer says, what? How can this happen to Joy? And they decide that they will carry Joy's matter on their head. What would that happen? It will now escalate it very quickly. Why? Because you thought that Joy was not powerful, influential, and you ignored Joy.
You didn't know that she had powers.
Exactly. And a third party who had that. So you have to look at it. So it's a constantly evolving thing. And that's why I gave that example. Look at the people that have the high interest, the high power, map everyone. But at each critical stage, when you are launching a product, stakeholders you need to communicate to it are very different. When a company is in crisis, your investors, for example, if you have investors, they become high priority at that time.
Yes.
At any other stage in your business, investors really don't ask for much. But if there's a crisis that is affecting their investment, you got to be communicating with them. So I hope I've been able to like break it down in that way.
Yes. I believe that you have. So you talked about influence, right? And interest. Right? So who has the power to shut down your business?
That's it.
And who is, interested in what you're doing. There's something you had mentioned earlier on that, I tried to remember to reiterate because it was quite important, but I guess we'll come back to it. So why is it critical for businesses to understand their stakeholders?
It is, I don't want to be dramatic, but it can be a do or die affair. Because imagine you are not communicating with your suppliers and something happens to your supplier or something, there's just a gap in communication that then affects the products that you are delivering. That means that you then deliver a substandard product. You're letting down your clients. That in itself can even lead them to switching. So it is so critical because your business operates, especially as a social enterprise, you operate to do good, make profit and do well. So you're not just making money, but you have to do it in such a way that your organization is conscientious. Your organization is doing what is good for the community, the society, and the nation in which you're living. And those bodies of different stakeholders, you have to carry them along. You have to know. So for example, in abroad or in the UK, US, there's this organization called Greenpeace, and they're very like, see, if Greenpeace enters the matter, oh my God.
If they sit on your case.
If they sit on your case. And what are they looking at? They're looking at environmental issues.
Yes.
They're looking at things that, what is the impact of your activities? How is it affecting climate? How is it? And they have a whole website. Look, those guys mean business.
Yes.
So you can be doing something that is affecting a community negatively, and they will bring it to your attention. So you need to pay attention to every stakeholder. And like I said in the previous question, how you pay attention to them would differ over time. But please, you need to at least be listening to know what is important to this stakeholder and how should I be engaging.
Okay. Fantastic. Fantastic. I'm really enjoying our conversations. So I wanted to ask, based on, your experience, what are some of the unique considerations for navigating stakeholder engagement, especially in Africa? We're multicultural, right? So many languages,
Yeah.
all these different things that can come up as barriers and challenges. But what are some of the things to consider in navigating that stakeholder engagement?
Like you rightly mentioned, the context is very, very broad. And so you have to be looking at culture. You have to be looking at what is important in each unique context. What you don't want to do is to say, oh, this is how our clients in Nigeria are. So we are going to Ghana and we're doing plug and play. It's going to be
Yes.
a big miss most of the times, right? So you want to understand the nuance. How do they relate to people? There are certain countries or regions that I don't want to say that they are anti-big organizations, but they've had this history of
Yes.
big organizations taking from them. So there's already this pushback and a wall. So you going there, you're not their hero. So you need to understand that how do we collaborate with them? How do we make them see that we're here for their good? So it requires a lot of research. And that's why I think one of the frustrating things for me working as a communications professional is people thinking, oh, it's communications. Just to post on social media. It's just to no, bros and sis.
Yeah.
There's research
No deeper
involved.
than that.
Very, very, it's so critical. So this question that you're asking me, there's research involved to say, even in Nigeria, what is the market?
Yes.
If you know your target audience, if for example your stakeholders, right, are people, let's use maybe market women in Lagos Island, how you are going to engage with them will be totally different. But if your clients are in VGC, because they're two totally different contexts, their vibe is different, their needs are different. So you really have to pay attention to that. And even if from a business like development perspective, it might be the same product that how you make it appeal to those two groups of people, it's going to be very different. So you want to look at what is the context, what are the cultural nuances, and then how do I make sure that my messaging lands well. There's also the respect. There are some things that in certain cultures is disrespectful.
Yes.
I know it's in Nigeria, I'm like, okay, we didn't know. So now collecting something from somebody's left hand, you were like, hello, but some people carry it on their big
It's
chest.
deep to them.
Exactly. So yeah, those are the things I would
Fantastic.
say.
So cultural nuances
Yeah.
and context. And this just reminds me of how I had learned that there are certain things that happen in a particular region in Nigeria. So you just hear the news, oh, health workers went there and this happened, and you're wondering, but they went there to help them. However, with research, we found out that in history, things that happened with pharmaceuticals, that have now made the people adverse to, health workers and pharmaceuticals and makes them react that way. So it's really important that you do your research,
Yeah.
guys. You have to do your research. Don't assume anything. Don't say, we saw it on Instagram. No. Do your research. Know your stakeholders. These things are very, very important.
Joy, can I just add something
Yes, please.
because of what you just said? So there are examples of probably people working in development organizations, right? And they'll be like, oh, this society, they don't have water, pipe-borne water. That's the women, and this is a real life example, have to walk 10 kilometers to go and fetch water and back. We're going to make sure that we dig boreholes.
Yes.
Do you know the community themselves, this particular example, destroyed that borehole? Why? Because for the women, that was their time of socializing.
Yes.
That time they took to, that you just thought, oh my God,
It's so wasting so much time. It's so stressful.
for them, it's like, this is the time for me
Yes.
to walk, to socialize. So they're like, you've cut that time off and I'm having to stay in the house. So again, somebody didn't do the research to understand, okay, do they really need this? How can we help? Okay, we want to cut down the time of her going to fetch this water. We want to bring clean water, but how do we make sure we still preserve that me time aspect, because it was totally lost? Project, a lot of money destroyed.
Look at that.
So sad.
And just proper research would have helped. Okay, so we do the boreholes, but we create a place where women can come to,
Exactly.
maybe once a day, once a week, to have this communion that they need.
And the research, to simplify it, it's also talking to the people. Don't go in as a savior.
Yeah.
Organizations do that a lot with CSR. Go and ask, why does this situation exist? What has been done before? What do they really need? Listen. And that's at the heart of stakeholder management, is just being able to listen. Because a lot of people don't listen.
Thank you so much. A lot of people don't listen to the people. They're the ones you want to help. They're the ones who know what they need, right? So it's best to listen to them. Fantastic. Okay, so what are some of the effective communication strategies, right, for building trust and long-term relationships with stakeholders, especially in the African context?
Trust is a very, very important thing that I don't even think organizations know how important trust is. If you lose trust, you lose the license to operate. So you must guard that trust. And that's where communications professionals come in terms of they're the guardians of your reputation. They guard that trust. And what is trust built on? Trust is built on openness, transparency, and communication, right? You say you are X. I experience this X. You say you are going to deliver Y. That is the experience, not what I ordered versus what I got. Right? So building trust requires, one, integrity, internal integrity. And this is not even just because sometimes organization can be outward, facing. We will talk about the stakeholders, your internal stakeholders, your people are so important. Are you representing yourself? So you can't say that we are an organization that we show empathy. You're showing empathy to your customers. You're showing empathy to the general public, but then you're lacking in empathy in your policies within your organization. That is a say-do problem. And at some point, it's going to become apparent that you are not who you say you are, because it has to flow from the inside. So trust is integrity. If this is who we are as a brand, as an organization, we stand by it. Now, no organization is perfect because we don't live in a perfect world. It then means that when you fall short of that standard that you have said that you would uphold and stay committed to, how do you, first of all, own up to, we've fallen short of this standard, or be transparent about what has happened, and then make sure it doesn't happen again. And that's usually in the era of issues management, crisis communications. If, for example, you create clothes and somehow you create something that was below the standard and expectation, how do you rectify that? How do you manage that issue? Building relationship is also communication. Now, we're moving from the time where we've moved previously decades ago, where advertising was very one way. Buy this, buy that, buy that. Brands have the power. Now, your stakeholders, the audience, they have the power with their phone, with social media. So what you want to be doing is you're communicating, you're passing across the information, but you're allowing them to give you feedback. Feedback that is also not necessarily always positive. Everything is haters. It's not everybody that hates you.
Exactly.
I know
Fix
that they
the
are
platform.
trolls. They are trolls, but at least give a room for the feedback. Then internally you see which one is this person is just being, but still you still have to manage that situation well. So if you want to build trust, you want to maintain relationships, you have to be transparent, you have to be an organization committed to integrity, and you have to make sure that that communication loop remains consistent and constant.
Fantastic. Openness, transparency, integrity, and communication. As you were speaking, different things were just coming to mind. And, it's interesting how sometimes on X, right, you see a celebrity post something and people are in the comments tagging certain banks and certain organizations and asking them questions. Why have I not received my money? My 20K is still hanging. And then you see them responding and say, please check your DMs. I'm like, okay. So it's really true your customers and your clients can now hold you accountable on a global platform, right? So it's important that you are who you say that you are. And I'll share this example, right? So when you were talking about internal stakeholders, a lot of people, forward facing, externally, it's like, oh, they're so this and they're so that. I remembered when you were talking about internal stakeholders and how, on the outside, some organizations look like they're doing great, but internally to the employees, they do the wicked. I remember when I resumed work at Leap Africa, I think I'd just been here a week, and then I attended an event and someone's asking me, oh, so where do you work? What do you do? And I started speaking about where I work, what they do, and how they're who they say they are, and this and this. And the person was like, oh, you must really like where you work. I said, yes, I've just been there for a week.
I love it.
And he was just like, what are you talking about? So during my onboarding process, they're taking us through these documents and things. And I could see the way everyone was at the office. I'm like, in Nigeria, wow, these people are who they say they are. And that has been consistent, right? So it's really important.
Shout out to Leap Africa.
So it's really important how you handle your internal stakeholders and your external stakeholders. So,
Joy, can I add something to that?
Yes, please.
It's a different topic, and it's employee advocacy and employee branding. Organizations, especially like small businesses, if you hack it right, your employees become advocates for you. Your employees become the ones carrying your matter on their head. Like I said, it's a different topic, but I'm just highlighting it to show that if you don't pay attention to it, they stand to lose a lot, basically.
Exactly. You are the one who stands to lose. We had made mention of social media in the last conversation. So let's talk about communication channels, right? Which communication channels can be leveraged, to raise awareness and gain public support and trust, really, for a sustainable business in Africa?
So there's no one size fits all answer. And that's the truth with anything that relates to communications and reaching your stakeholders. Why? If, for example, you want to reach, I don't know how our parents have just taken over Facebook. If I just said, you know what, I'm going to leave this territory for you guys. If you want to reach their generation, for example, yes, some of them are on Instagram, some of them are on TikTok, but it may pay you better to either use WhatsApp, where they find those forwarded messages, God knows.
Forwarded many times.
But it may serve you better to use WhatsApp or Facebook because why? That's where they are. So your communication channels really is about, where is my audience, my stakeholders? What is the best way? There are some stakeholders that one newsletter per month is all they need. And those are the stakeholders that will fall under the keep informed bracket. So for example, you have donors that donate into your organization and they just want to know, okay, this month, this is what we did, or this quarter. They don't need you to bombard them with information.
Yes.
There's regulators, they want to know your compliance. And there's your audience that are every social media, Instagram, X. So your channels really depends on your stakeholders. And it also really depends on what your business is. If you're a B2C, which is you're a business that you're facing the consumer directly, you have to use the channels where you would engage them, and that's social media. But if you're like a business to business, maybe you would just stick with LinkedIn, for example. So you have to tailor those channels according to what is the most effective in terms of reaching my stakeholders or my target audience. Where are they most active at? If they are not there, some people say, oh, Adedoyin, TikTok is trending. Let's open a TikTok account. I say, why?
Your customers are not there.
Who are you? Okay, so what content, please, are you going to be putting there? So there's a lot that goes into thinking about your channel, right? Your communication channel. But it's what is the most effective platform? And there's some people, look, you're going to have to bring them face to face.
Right.
There's some people, certain matters, engagement needs to be done face to face. But it has to be so tailored. Don't go and copy what Business X is doing. Even if Business X is doing exactly the same business that you are doing, please still make sure that your decisions and choices are based on data and insights that come from research.
Fantastic. This research, again,
I will keep saying it because
so
we take
important.
it for granted.
Yes. Especially with communications. Like you said, just post it on Instagram, post it TikTok.
Let's dance on TikTok.
Let's dance on TikTok. Your customers are not there, right? Thank you so much for that response. So let's talk about challenges, right? What are some of the challenges that businesses face in communicating with their stakeholders, and how can they overcome these challenges?
I think one of the biggest challenges right now, especially when you're talking about, and I'm going to take the stakeholder being your customers or your potential
Okay.
clients, is that we are in a very, how do I use this? People are very touchy now. You will put something out.
Quite sensitive.
Are you trying to say that women are, but you're like, I didn't really state it there, And then let's not now migrate to the abroad where everybody is them day, and you're like,
Yeah.
so it's a lot. It can be a lot. So it can be very challenging to craft one message that has the same meaning to everybody, because
Everybody.
now there's so many filters, because you don't know who is going to say, oh, wow, Leap Africa, young people, are you trying to say Gen Zs are? But you're like, no, we're just trying to encourage. The message was supposed to be positive, but somebody
Yes.
somewhere. So you have to think about that nuance. And that's why I said that constant listening and responding, engaging, getting feedback is so important. So trying to communicate with a diverse set of people. When we're talking about prioritizing and grouping your audiences, sometimes you may need to segment them in maybe age. Okay, so for example, not too long ago, there was a bank that put out a particular communication, and you could tell that it had a very Gen Z type of slant. But the older people were very offended.
Offended.
Hey, God.
Yes.
In fact, that day, how can they do that? And I was like, the people that they're trying to reach get
They
it. They're
get
like,
the message.
what's on top of steez? They're trying to be. I was like, but you see, the issue is that the bulk of this particular institution's money is coming from the older people.
Yeah, it's old money.
It's all money, because this, I'm not saying Jersey don't have money, please don't come for me.
We have new money.
But so that particular organization, and these are the nuances. That's why I said one size fits all can never work. If a bulk of your people are, your money is coming from this group and they are very conservative, then you need to tread carefully. So those
Yes.
things are challenges. How do I balance it? And we're now living in a multi-generational world, different. So how do you communicate to Gen Z's, millennial, baby boomers with the same message? It's very tough. And then I think a final challenge that I would address is, how do you make sure that you stay relevant, staying on top? Because you can't really meet everybody's needs at once. Let's be very honest. You have to stay true to who you are as a business, because you are there to make money. Any business that's not making money, you are going to be,
Yeah.
so how do you balance? So is this issue about sustainability, for example, right? You want to be a sustainable business. You want to do things right, but you also want to make sure that it is profitable for you to be sustainable. So how do you make sure you do it, that getting that balance and then carrying all your stakeholders along? So those are some of the challenges, but they can be overcome again with engagement. You can phase, for example, okay, we're going to focus on government, because if they revoke our license, we will not be in operation. But then let's find out what this bucket of people need. Media, for example, let's focus on, okay, these cooperatives, maybe we would engage them in this way. And then you create some sort of plan on how you will now, and it's sequence or a timeline. So that's a way for you to overcome some of those challenges.
Fantastic. You had mentioned that we now live in a multi-generational environment, thanks to social media, right? Everyone can see everything. So how does one message communicate the same thing to all of these people at the same time? And I think one thing that just occurred to me is, not following trends, right? Let's not say, it's trending. Now everybody, they are doing this.
Just jump on it.
How would your own stakeholders perceive it,
Yeah.
right? If you not communicate the right thing to them, there's no point. It's okay for you to be conservative if your stakeholders are that way, because, and like you said, sensitivity. You put out a message thinking, we're saying A. By the time they give you feedback on that message, you say, where did we put letter Z in this? X is not here,
Exactly.
And you also have to know how to respond
Yeah.
to those things, because in this age it will probably come up a lot
Yeah.
more than it used to come up before. Thank you so much. And you'd mentioned something about sustainability and profitability. So it has to be profitable.
Yeah.
Your sustainability has to be profitable for it to even be
And
sustainable. Because if,
there's something that's coming to me as you're speaking,
yeah,
and it's because what I'm not saying that you become what your stakeholders expect. You have to be authentic. So if you use a brand like Red Bull energy drink, they are very like, I don't want to say outrageous. They have this daredevil personality.
yes, that's
So
the
if you
persona.
remember in Lagos, somebody was walking on one. Did you ever see it? He walks on. What did he walk on? Was it a line or
Like a
something?
tightrope.
Like a tightrope.
Yes.
That's it. And I was like, why? Why someone just wake up one morning? But hey, that's Red Bull's vibe. So Red Bull doesn't have stakeholders that be
Oh my god. Hey.
because that's the they stay,
Yeah.
but then they still carry their stake because in the middle of those daredevil storms, nobody can mistakenly die.
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
Because that would be problem for Red Bull. So they will take
Cautions.
precautions
Yes.
to make sure that okay, we want to do this risky thing because that is our brand. But what things are we putting in place to make sure that we don't have any lawsuits, we protect the safety of the people, we stay. So you must still stay authentic. But again, it's the point about listening and being aware that allows you to then respond appropriately.
Thank you very much. And that just reminded me of something you said earlier, research, right? And engagement. So do your research and communicate with the people.
Exactly.
That way you're able to meet their needs per time, which is ever changing, by the way.
It is
All
actually.
right. So our time is fast spent. I was really enjoying this conversation.
I enjoy it too.
Okay. They tag the final words, but we shall see if those will be the final words. How do you see the future of stakeholder communication evolving, and what should businesses do to stay ahead?
I think it's more of businesses listening, bringing their stakeholders. I can just imagine. So, for example, Leap Africa, you bring some of your stakeholders, engage with them, let them have a tour of your facility, carry them as almost, how shareholders are carried along or people that have a stake, because that's the word stakeholder.
Yes.
If this person has a stake in this organization, yes, they may not be giving you money. How do I carry them along? So I see it being very complementary, more of engagement. And for businesses, and not to sound like a broken record, it's just to just make sure that you are listening. Some things you may not be able to do anything about, but at least when you listen, you are aware. I think the worst things for business is to just wake up one day and realize, oh my God, something has happened that just throws off your business, throws off your operations, threatens the existence of
Yes.
that business. Very few things just come like that. Sometimes it's because something has been ignored from a long time,
Yes,
or you
yes.
just think maybe this thing doesn't matter. So it's people that are really, really interested in because if you're doing a business and that is benefiting people, you're passionate about it. How do you communicate that? How do you make sure that people see the value? How do you make sure that you're after the well-being of your end users? How do you make sure that people that have a stake internally and externally in this business, you grow along together? And that's essentially where I see the future and seeing more leaders being authentic communicators, because a lot of leaders are like, hello, don't let me say what I want to say, but and then especially business owners, right? Talk about the impact of what you do, but then please listen, please respond, and then please pay attention to communication. Let me sleep this day for my people. Don't just tell your communications person, oh, I want press release. No, they are the guardians of your reputation. Remember, we spoke about trust.
Yes.
If you lose that trust, you lose the license to operate. So you really need to make sure you're getting counsel, because no organization can effectively manage stakeholders without their communications person. It's a collaborative process. They will craft the messaging for you. They will say, something is happening. We need to pay attention to this. So you carry them along, and then, even when the times it feels like, okay, there's friction, you can ride through that waves more seamlessly.
Yes, yes. If you lose that trust, you lose the license to operate. And that's quite deep. Really, it sounds like, oh, it's just a statement. It's nice to say, but it is quite deep. If you lose the trust of your stakeholders, what's left? Really. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Adedoyin. This has
Joy.
been such a profound conversation. I'd just like you to share some final words with our viewers.
Final words, final words. I think, first of all, if you're in business, I feel like, well, maybe I'm speaking for myself. I like to think about impact. I want to make money. I want to live a good life, but I also want people to be impacted positively by what I do. So it's very important for you to remain driven by that vision, your why. Why did I start this? And think about, how can I convert people that work internally? How do I convert them into ambassadors of this business? How do I convert my customers, my clients into ambassadors of this business? How do I convert certain stakeholder groups, even the media can become an ambassador of your business? Why?
Yes.
Because they see the vision, you have powerfully communicated the vision, and they see it. So really think about that vision, tell it to as many stakeholders possible, and then just keep going for it, essentially. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Adedoyin, for coming on the show and for sharing
Thank
so
you.
knowledgeably. I mean, this has been a very, very insightful conversation
glad,
that
I'm
we
glad.
have had. Thank you once again. Our viewers, I know that you have written down some notes. Don't just write these things. Make sure you take action. Like she said, do your research, communicate, engage with your stakeholders. You've learned how to identify your stakeholders, how to categorize them. Who are your internal stakeholders? Who are your external stakeholders? How do you get your internal stakeholders to become your ambassadors? Don't start the business and then you'll not be owing people salary. You didn't tell them that this was going on or this was happening. Because yes, we know that we have some of these economic challenges and all of that. Yes, so things may be difficult sometimes. Communicate. They are also your stakeholders. Do your research. Know what works for you and for your stakeholders per time. And then you'd be able to effectively engage them over a long period of time. I hope that this episode has really, really been insightful for you as it has been for us back here. Thank you so much once again, Adedoyin.
Thank you.
All right. Dear viewers, thank you for watching today's episode. And if you found this episode useful, give us a thumbs up. Thank you. Just give us a thumbs up and share it with other people. Don't keep the information to yourself. They would also find this useful. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell. Wait, you're subscribed? Okay, great. The notification bell, click it so that once we post these podcast episodes, you can be the first to see it and get the information that you need from it. So for more insightful episodes like this, please visit our website at www.leapafrica.org/podcast. You can also follow us on social media at Leap Africa on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, and of course, X, formerly Twitter, for more updates. Until the next episode of the Youthful and Useful podcast, continue to partner for impact and communicate. Bye.